If you're asking yourself, how can I learn Gaelic and what's the best way to do that, then you've come to the right place. You might think that short of just moving to Scotland, it's nearly impossible to learn Gaelic. But I'm here to tell you, there are ways to learn Gaelic, and I have found the best one. And we're going to talk about it in this video. Fáilte go video úr is mis Charles. Agus ha mé Gaelsachig, Gaelic, Cymraeg, agus Japanish. I've been learning Gaelic slowly for several years now, and I've tried a lot of different ways to learn Gaelic. And so I want to tell you about the way that I think is the most effective way to learn Gaelic if you're not living in Scotland, which I know many of you who watch my channel and are interested in Scottish culture and heritage are not in Scotland. Now, if you're in Scotland, then you can go and learn in person, with a community group or at a church or at a university. Those are all viable options if you are in Scotland. But if you're not in Scotland, then the only way is going to be online. And there's lots of great resources out there, which I also use. There's of course Duolingo, which is like the gateway drug into Gaelic. I know that was the way it was for me and probably for a lot of you as well. There's also the Learn Gaelic website, as well as BBC Olapa, and lots of other websites that you can use. But those are very much self-led activities in order to learn Gaelic. And so the best way, I think, to learn is to have a teacher and to have someone who can guide you along the way and provide correction when you need it, which you're not going to be able to get if you're just doing things from a book or from an app or even from a website, even if the website is very helpful. And so because of that, the best way to learn Gaelic, in my opinion, is through Jason Bond's online course called Gaelic Foundations.
If you've never studied Gaelic before, but you've really wanted to, maybe it looks a bit funky, it's a bit intimidating, don't worry. We're going to go step by step.
Now, I've talked a lot about this course in the past, but this time, for those of you who might be on the fence and trying to decide, should I get the course, should I not get the course, I want to give you a whole review of it and describe my experiences with it to help convince you that it is worth your money and, more importantly, your time and effort if you want to learn to speak Gaelic. Let's talk about the pros and cons of Jason's course. Now, there's a lot of pros, and they totally outweigh the cons. And the biggest one, I think, is because it is self-paced. The reason why I say that is because, like I said earlier, if you're not in Scotland, it's going to be a lot harder for you to find a place in a community, and especially a teacher that you can learn with. You might be able to get a virtual tutor one-on-one who will do Zoom classes with you, but that's also very difficult and it's expensive. It would be really cool to take an online class from a university in Scotland. Like, I personally would love to take a distance learning course through Sál Mór Óstach, but that's just not flexible because you still have to be, in the classroom virtually and with the teacher and do the assignments and everything like that. And because I have small children and work and all these things, I'm not able to do that yet. But what I can do is a self-paced online course with Jason. So for me, the flexibility is what made Gaelic Foundations the perfect choice. Gaelic Foundations is rigorous yet self-paced. It is the perfect balance between trying to figure it all out on my own and actually enrolling online at a Scottish university, which I would love to do in the future but can't do right now. Another reason that I think Gaelic Foundations is awesome is because the way Jason teaches is just like he would in a classroom setting with live students. He's going to be focusing on what's called comprehensible input, where you learn via the target language in whatever you're studying. And so you're going to learn that through context, through hand signals, through drawings, even stories that Jason comes up with. And he's very animated, and it really makes the learning experience fun because even if you don't have very much Gaelic, you can start out from the very beginning of the course and you will learn through the course of watching his videos.
Fó, aun, ed. A top tip, actually it's more of a secret, is gesturing builds muscle memory, which makes it much easier to recall words. Try it. Air. You won't forget air. If you do it with me, you'll remember it better. Even remembering that this crazy long-haired guy is doing this, you're going to remember it better than if it's just air. So we're making the Gaelic memorable for you.
I know many of you have probably watched Jason's YouTube videos, and so you're probably a little bit familiar with the method that I'm talking about, where he stands in front of the whiteboard, or he films himself drawing on a whiteboard, and, you know, talks about different things and voices everything over in Gaelic. But when it's just a YouTube video, there's no kind of, you know, commitment. It's almost like you need to dip your toe in the water. Whereas with the course, you're actually going through a curriculum that he's designed in order to take you from having little to no knowledge to having basic conversations and be able to read basic paragraphs. And that focus on learning in the target language, actually learning Gaelic through Gaelic, is actually one of the important things about this, because if you're always switching back to your native language, which for most of y'all is going to be English, then it's going to be a lot harder to absorb the Gaelic because you're learning about Gaelic rather than learning in Gaelic. And so because of that, Jason doesn't switch into English very often unless he has to explain something that can only be explained in English. And the further on you get in the course, the less and less he uses English, so that you can tell you're starting to gain comfortability with a lot of the words and grammar structures in Gaelic because he's been using them all along to teach you. Then, at the end of each of these video lessons, there's a little place where you can ask a question and you can view questions that other people have asked, and Jason himself will go back and answer your questions. Now, it's not as instantaneous as it would be in a classroom setting, but because it's self-paced, that means you can ask the question when it's convenient for you, and Jason will be able to answer the question whenever he has the time to go through and answer everybody's questions. And sometimes I've found that when I have a question about something he said in a video, if I go and check the questions that have already been asked, half the time the question I'm going to ask, somebody else has already asked, and I don't even have to ask them. I can just look at the answer and find it there. So that is really cool to be able not just to learn, but also to be able to ask questions and know that I'll get a response from my instructor, who values me as a student. Also, there's going to be little quizzes scattered throughout the lessons so that you can kind of internalize what you've learned. That's the point of being tested, right, is to consolidate your knowledge. It's not so much to be able to regurgitate the answer, but to be able to kind of internalize what you've learned. One of the greatest things, though, about Gaelic Foundations is that so many of the lessons are based on stories that Jason is telling.
I've got a story for you.
Maybe he traveled somewhere, or maybe his hobbies, or maybe the things that he likes to eat. All these different things he's talking about in Gaelic, and so it puts all of the words and the sentence structures that you're learning into a context, and it makes it so much more memorable than something like Duolingo, where the context you have is a single word or a single sentence in isolation. Then after each set of narrative lessons, the story itself is then summarized in written form, and Jason has recorded audio of him reading the written form so that you can easily learn how to read and listen to the Gaelic that you've heard about through these videos, so that when you want to come back and review what you've learned, you don't have to watch all of the other, 3 or 4 long videos where he's been telling you the story and explaining what the words mean and things like that. You can just go to the summary section and watch a short summary video, and then listen to and read a short summary text, which explains everything that was talked about. It tells the story very succinctly, and it allows you to see the Gaelic written down in complete paragraphs. This is really good because it means you're learning not just through watching Jason talk like in a YouTube video, you're also getting to read in complete paragraphs, and you're getting to listen to him read those paragraphs. So you're learning in multiple different forms, it's going into your brain, and it's helping you kind of memorize those patterns. So being able to go back and review either the video summary and or the written summary with Jason's audio just makes it so much easier to review and solidify what you've learned when you come back and review it. Because when you're learning language, you are going to have to review things over and over again. Some people think that they just go through a course and they watch every video one time and then they completely memorize everything. It's like, well, that's not how you learn with most things. So it's definitely not going to be how you learn with Gaelic. And so because Jason knows this, he's made it easy for you to then review the lessons that he's done without having to go through each individual lesson all over again. Although you can definitely do that as well if you need to. And even though this is a Gaelic Foundations course, and so it in that way is a kind of beginner course for those learning Gaelic, it's still going to challenge you at times. And so as you get further into the course, there's going to be sections where you can practice writing in Gaelic, which if you're anything like me, I'm usually better at speaking and reading Gaelic than I am in writing it down. I would say, especially for us native English speakers, this is a really good practice because the orthography in Gaelic, the way things are spelled and written, is so different than we're used to in English that actually having to write down not just a single word, or fill in the blanks like on Duolingo, but actually typing out a complete paragraph is going to be super, super helpful for you in order to really get a grasp on the language itself. Now, I do have one more thing about Gaelic Foundations that I want to tell you about, but stick around to the end where I talk about that, because first I want to talk about a few of the cons, because there are just a couple. The first few are really just the limitations of the system. And when I say the system, I mean the online platform that the course is delivered through. So there's several different online platforms that creators use to build and sell their online courses. And the one that Jason uses is called Thinkific. It's one of the major brands out there. It's, it's good, it's fine. But I will say the way that it's set up, it can be hard sometimes to find content if you're looking for something specific. There is a little search bar that you can use to search for things, but you can't really search by topic or by the content in the lessons. Instead, you're only able to search by the lesson title. So you kind of have to know the lesson title that has the content that you're looking for in it in order for the search function to really work for you. So that is a limitation of Thinkific, not of Jason's course. Another thing that some people might view as a con, but in some ways I think is just inherent to the way you have to learn languages, is that his video lessons are much better for watching and listening to rather than just listening to. So, for example, if you try to play a lesson in the car or play it, in your headphones while you're trying to do something else, like wash the dishes, you're not going to be able to learn as much as if you were also watching the screen.
My job is to make sure that you understand everything that I say. And I'm going to be drawing up here, I'm going to be gesturing to make sure it's very clear to you. So, feel free to stop, rewind, rewatch, whatever is useful to you.
Because since you're learning in Gaelic, if there's a new word that Jason mentions and you're not able to look at the screen to see what it means based on the drawing or the translation that he writes down, then you're just going to hear the word and not really know exactly what it means. So then you have to go back and sit down and actually watch it, with no distractions going on. So some people might say, oh, well, that's a con, that's a downside because I want to be able to do it through audio only. And it's like, well, that is a valuable way to learn, and there are other apps out there like that I've talked about before, like Glossica, which you can watch some of my videos about Gaelic and Glossica right up here, which you can do in audio-only mode. But in that case, it is a learning tool. It is an app, rather like an audio Duolingo, for lack of a better term. And so in that way, it's not a course. So it accomplishes something different. So if you want to be able to practice hands-free and audio-only, then just use a different tool, for that instance. Also, one of the other cons is, I would say that sometimes it can be a little tedious to wait for Jason to finish drawing his picture or writing out his translation, because he'll quickly say a word or say a phrase, an entire sentence, and then he writes down the entire word or phrase, and then changes markers and then writes down the translation or the drawing, things like that. And so sometimes it can be kind of like, okay, you just said the phrase, and now I want to instantly see what it means, and then keep going. Some people, could easily say, oh, you should just edit out the part where he's writing things down. You should just edit that out. It's like, well, maybe, but this is also a good chance for you to watch and see how he's writing it so that you can focus on how it's being spelled. This is a chance for you to internalize, the word that he's just said, so you can remember how to pronounce it. And so, even though he doesn't cut the camera and doesn't edit out, this seemingly downtime where he's writing things out, it is, I think, almost like a challenge for us as modern learners who want everything, so quickly. We want instant gratification. It's really an invitation to slow down and really learn what's happening and what you're being taught. So it kind of gives your brain a break and lets you, think about what he just said and get ready for the next part of the lesson. So you can consider that a con, but I really think that's one of those areas where it's a feature rather than a bug, as long as you kind of orient your mind the right way so that these pauses during the lessons are actually helpful to you rather than slowing you down. Finally, I will say some of the lessons are quite long because it is kind of set up like a classroom setting. So you might have a 20 or 30 minute video, and you might have to stop in the middle and just come back to it later. So sometimes I wish they were broken up a little bit more, but that's also partially dependent on just the type of lesson he's doing. So some of the lessons where he's talking about, you know, how to count in certain ranges and certain styles of counting in Gaelic, because there's several types. Those videos might be shorter because those topics are just, you can cover them in 4 or 5 minutes and then you go on to the next one. Whereas if it's a long story about him in Thailand and seeing people, you know, with snakes in Thailand and things like that, if you know, you know, then it takes a little bit of time to tell that story. And so rather than break it up into a bunch of little, you know, bite-sized lessons, he just keeps it as one long video. So if it's a long video and you need to pause it in the middle and come back, you can always do that. Not a big deal. So I've talked about why I think Gaelic Foundations is one of the best possible ways to learn Gaelic if you're not in Scotland. I've talked about the pros and cons. So you might be thinking, who is this Jason Bond and why should I listen to him? After all, he's just like you, Carl. He's a silly American. Why should I listen? Well, Jason's not just some random dude who's been learning Gaelic longer than you have. He's actually somebody who has studied Gaelic formally in Nova Scotia and in Scotland, so he's got degrees and certificates. He doesn't like to talk about it because he's modest, but he's actually got some credentials there. And he even lived in Scotland and taught Gaelic on the Isle of Skye. So if anybody knows how to teach Gaelic, it is Bond, Jason Bond, teacher of Gaelic and Witcher enthusiast. That's your service. So Sean Connery jokes aside, Gaelic Foundations is really cool because it is set up as this comprehensive learning journey. A lot of you, if you've already heard of Jason or maybe seen some of his videos on YouTube, that kind of invites you into this course that I'm talking about, the beginner level Gaelic Foundations. And then at the end of Gaelic Foundations, you kind of continue your journey by reading his short novella based on Scottish and Irish mythology called Rona agus Mach Coldrium. And then after that, that leads you straight into his intermediate course for learning and speaking Gaelic, which is the one I'm taking right now. He set it up to where, you know, you take these steps along the path and it takes you closer and closer to being able to communicate with people in Gaelic, both online and in person. The final thing that I mentioned earlier that you will love about Gaelic Foundations is how affordable it is.
Gleva, gleva.
As someone who's bought a lot of online courses and also sells online courses, the value that you get from Gaelic Foundations compared to the cost is astronomically disproportional. And what I mean by that is you get so much value for your money. And even if you can't buy the course all at once, he's got this super easy payment plan where you can pay like a tiny little bit every month and you can start your Gaelic learning journey today. So I challenge all of you that are serious about learning Gaelic. Duolingo and all the other websites and apps are amazing and you should use them because I still use them. But what actually gave me the not just ability but also confidence to speak Gaelic, not only in person but also online with all of y'all, is Jason's Gaelic Foundations course. I cannot recommend it enough. And if you'd like to support my channel as well as learn Gaelic, then you can go grab Jason's course using the affiliate link down below.
All right, thank you so much for joining me. Really nice to see you today. Nice to enjoy some Gaelic with you. Do a little bit of drawing, have a bit of fun, and grow your Gaelic instincts. All right, Gleva, I'll see you in another video. Gleva, Gleva.